I think we're good. My name is Michael Moraine. I'm the editor-in-chief of DSM Magazine, and thank you for tuning in to our ongoing series called Lifting the Veil. We have an annual publication that focuses on mental health and is an opportunity to share some stories and promote understanding and reduce the stigma about mental health that keeps some people from seeking help. Over the past few years, it's hard to measure, but I think we've made some real progress as a society about being more open about talking about mental health and just realizing that none of us is alone, thanks in part to discussions like this. So we are looking forward to a good discussion today. I want to start by thanking our sponsors. We would not be able to do this without generous support from community sponsors, starting with our presenting sponsor, Broadlawns. And joining us today is Dr. Kindra Perry, who is a Broadlawns psychologist and an assistant vice president for outpatient behavioral health. So, hello, Kindra, welcome.
Hi, Michael. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. As he said, I'm Dr. Kinder Perry, a psychologist and the Assistant Vice President of Behavioral Health here at Broadlands. I oversee our outpatient behavioral health, which includes therapy, crisis support, community-based services, addictions, and other specialized treatment programs. And we are proud to sponsor Lifting the Veil because we know events like this make conversations about mental health more open and accessible. We know that when people hear real experiences and straightforward information, it reduces the hesitation that someone has from reaching out. So creating this kind of space is essential for what we're all working towards, which is a healthier, more connected community. Um, at Broadlands, we support people across the full spectrum of mental health needs, that comprehensive mental health services, whether it's therapy, medication, crisis support. And our priority really is to provide accessible, evidence-based care. We want people to be able to receive support without unnecessary barriers. There's enough barriers already. And events like this underscore the importance of ensuring people know where to turn and that they feel welcome when they do reach out. So thank you to DSM Magazine for hosting this meaningful conversation. And thanks to each one of you for taking time out of your day to join as well. And if you or someone in your life needs support and you're ready, Broadlands is here. Our clinicians would love to help and are committed to just being that steady, welcoming resource in the community. I'm glad you're here with us today and look forward to the discussion ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Perry. Keep up the good work, and please pass on our thanks to Broadlawns. I also want to give a shout out to our supporting sponsors from Easter Seals and St. Gregory Ivory Plains for your continued support for this series and all the work you do in the community. If you are a regular on these series, you know how this play out. But for newcomers, I want to let you know that throughout this discussion, we will be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions, feel free to type those into the chat, and we will try to fold your questions in and direct them to our guest experts. I'm really looking forward to the experts we're going to hear from today. They're going to lead us through a discussion that this time we're gonna theme it around the idea of mental health through every stage of life. From childhood to older adulthood, we'll explore how mental health needs evolve as we age and how, with the right understanding and support, we can foster resilience and compassion at all of those life stages along the way. We all know that there are challenges, but there are also people who can help, and we will hear from them today. These are just a few of the people who show up in our next publication, which we're going to post online today, and then the printed publication will be available in the next few weeks and tucked into the January, February issue of DSM Magazine. So today we're going to hear from Dr. Jordan Bell, an assistant professor of occupational therapy at Des Moines University, from Maria LaFrance, who is a parent of a child with special needs, from David Isles, an assistant general manager with Isles Funeral Homes, from Maddie Maury, a social worker with Maury Counseling and Consulting, from Lars Peterson, a therapist with Employee and Family Resources, and from Jill Wells, who is a noted artist here in town with works all over the world, really. So it's quite a diverse mix of mix of experts, but each one has an individual, a different perspective to share. So we're going to break this discussion up into three parts. We're going to start with Lars Peterson, who again is a therapist with employee and family resources. And he's done some research and some put together a really useful presentation on about worry and about how we can kind of break the cycle of rumination that gets all of us anxious sometimes. So Lars, welcome. I see you in the mix here. Let's
Yes.
just
Thank
jump,
you.
let's just jump right in. How do you define rumination, and how is that different than just kind of everyday worry?
Well, one definition of rumination is just deep thought, but that's not how I mean it. I mean it in terms of thinking over and over again in a repetitive manner, in an unhelpful manner about the past. Uh, so get kind of stuck in this loop of, oh, why did I do that, or what about this, and why did it go down that way, and we just get stuck there.
Mhm. I am sure as soon as we log off and there's a posted recording, I will wonder, oh, why did I say that one thing, or why didn't I ask this one question?
I will
I,
too.
I'm very familiar with this loop of self-doubt. Why do so many folks, why does it drag us down? Why do so many folks get caught in a loop like that?
One way to understand it that I think is especially helpful is looking at the systems that are kind of part of us, and one is a threat system. So the strongest, most reactive, and maybe the most important in some ways system is the threat system. When we detect a threat, it used to be primarily externally, but now it can be externally, internally, can be from social media, not measuring up. It could come at us in any kind of way that puts us in a little bit of a fight, flight, or freeze.
Mhm.
And then that gets, for many of us, that gets us either worrying about the future and what if, or why did I say that? I should have said it this way. Why did I do that? And if I would have done that, then I wouldn't be in this place, you know. So some kind of a threat, again, whether it's internal or external.
It, I'm not an expert on any of this, but it seems like our brains have evolved to help us survive. And so sometimes it feels like we are fighting against evolutionary tips that have helped us get this far.
Very, very true. And in fact, sometimes a certain degree of worry about the future, if you want to call it that, or rumination can be helpful when we don't get stuck there. It's like, oh, okay, that's probably why I said that. And next time I want to do this, or same thing with worry. There's in the presentation, I talk about productive worry and unproductive worry.
Mhm.
Productive worry is workable. It helps us get somewhere. Unproductive worry, again, we're stuck in this loop going around and around and around. So that makes it especially hard because if worry or rumination pays off every now and then, it's kind of at, being at a slot machine. And well, if I keep trying, it may pay
Mhm.
off. So yeah, it's tricky.
In your presentation, you've pointed out a useful distinction between things we can control and things we cannot, which makes sense to us when we are cool and thinking logically about it.
Right.
But in the heat of the moment, how can you share any practical tips to help people identify what is within our realm of control and what is something that we just need to adapt to?
You make a really important point. When we're right in the middle of a situation, it's really hard to know the difference. That's why, and I know we haven't gotten there yet, but that's why it's really important to find ways to get more grounded, get more present so we can think more clearly.
Mhm.
Um, so, this what we can control and what we need to accept, or what we can influence and what we need to accept, is such a simple concept. It shows up in, all the major world religions and Stoicism, so many ways, but it's so hard to remember to do, right? Especially when we're caught up in the middle of a
Mhm.
situation. I'm working with two clients right now who, not all of our work, there's some trauma that's being worked with that also leads to more fight, flight, or freeze. Anytime there's trauma in the past that's unhealed. But the work with both of these clients is Part of it is reminding them over and over and over again, and us kind of exploring what they do need to accept and what they can influence, what they can manage or have some agency with.
Sometimes I imagine when people accept that there are things that they cannot control, especially when we're dealing with heavy stuff, tough stuff, that grief accompanies that there are some things we can't change, and that's just a tough fact of life. How do you coach some of your patients through that grief that comes with accepting that there are things that we cannot change?
Uh, for many, it's baby steps. So um, one of the ways I talk to people about the process of psychotherapy is it's getting more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And you don't just jump in the water, that just floods the system, or dive off the high dive, that floods the system and they're not able to process and again think clearly. So it's baby steps. And if there's something that was especially I'm working with someone right now who was very, very close to their dad, and we're still really struggling with grief over that. And in those kinds of situations, you can get stuck in, well, why didn't I spend more time with him? Why didn't I do? Why did, and all that rumination, which can then prevent the grief from really coming to the forefront and being healed. So, worry and rumination both can be a way for people not have to face some really difficult emotions, not just grief.
You also encourage people to create a safe space, and sometimes that is a physical, real place, but sometimes it's a little more abstract or metaphorical. Can you share a few tips about that or what that safe space is about?
Yes. First of all, it's important to make sure that the external space, again, external space is safe. So that's the first piece of that. Secondly, as far as the internal space, making it safe, what are the triggers? What are things that are happening? There's this concept, it's the window of tolerance. The middle of the window is when we're calm and alert. Up above is when we're angry, anxious, kind of too much arousal. Down below is shut down, disconnected. And so really recognizing and understanding what gets the person out of that window of tolerance, and then creating more safety around that. It might be having a friend who's especially safe and validating to talk to. It may be having, for many, a pet, nature. It was interesting. The photo of me at the very beginning was me outside in nature, which was, and that's what the photographer thought would be a good place to do this. So nature can be especially safe for many people, not all. So it's really working with the person to find out what safety means for them. And sometimes it's as simple as, do you feel safe with me right now? Because they don't feel safe in almost any environment. And then just kind of building slowly from there.
Are there certain kinds of relationships that you encourage people to build? I'm sure there are positive friendships or supportive, the idea that people should surround themselves with supportive people, or what kind of relationships do you encourage for people who often get stuck in a rumination cycle?
There's this concept, and I've done some webinars around it. There's more organizationally that came about organizationally, and it's psychological safety. But it really means being free to be who we are, not walking on eggshells, not worrying about saying just the right thing, not worrying about making a mistake. And so those kinds of relationships where a person, can be real, can feel safe psychologically, that would be and I think that's why I'm a dog lover, so I'll just use dogs as an example, can be so helpful, that unconditional love. I was doing a consultation with a person who's really, and I was learning from him, a person really skilled in compassion focused therapy. And he went into a junior high after a very tragic incident had happened. And he was meeting with about 10 junior high kids, boys, all boys. They would not say a word the first 10 minutes. I mean, they just sat around looking like, nope, I'm not talking. And then somebody brought in a therapy dog. And within 5 minutes, the whole room was. So there's a lot of ways that relationships can be safe, but psychological safety is not a bad way to look at it.
Dogs are the secret weapon, I think. It's good.
For many, for many.
I'm curious too, how do people recognize um surely friendships are helpful and supportive relationships are helpful and can be really useful. How do people recognize when they might need a little more, when they should seek out professional help with a therapist like you or someone else? How do they know when they've sort of crossed a line or they need to bring on the experts?
Sure. That's a great question. When day-to-day functioning is really impacted, maybe the person's avoiding more than they used to, when their sleep is impacted, when their appetite is impacted, they're using food they're eating too much as a coping strategy or not eating, when they're on their devices too much and they just notice that they're increasingly need to be distracted so that they, you know, not going through kind of overthinking or rumination or overthinking reminds me, I had a client who he used the word overthinking for what happened with him. And he said, in a really bad week, I'll have about 50 drinks.
Hmm.
Well, I don't think you need to go to 50 drinks to know that there's an issue, but using some kind of a coping strategy that just isn't working is a
Mhm.
pretty sure sign.
If somebody watching right now is kind of caught on an overthinking cycle, um, is there one small step that you would recommend? Just one takeaway from today's session?
Yes, it would be to find a way, either through engaging someone, through finding online resources, but find a way to be present and grounded and practice that. I do a lot of webinars and also obviously see people. And when I lead people through something, the 5-2-5, find five things in your environment, red, white, blue, square. But I lead them through two sounds. If they're outside nature, five sounds, and then five things in their body. I'll lead people through that, and I'll ask them ahead of time to think about something stressful so
Mhm.
that it ramps them up some. 95% of the time, they feel less stressed. And
Mhm.
so just engaging as many senses as we can brings us into the present moment. One quick piece about that is a lot of times people will say, "Oh, that was really good. I was distracted." And I'm like, "Well, were you distracted or was the rumination and the worry distracting you from the present moment?"
Mhm.
So any kind of way to get into the five senses.
Thank you for sharing some of your insights, Lars. So often it's easy to say, "Oh, don't worry about it," but it does take practice, and it's
Mm.
useful to know that we can improve with practice. That we can actually reduce worrying with a little practice with your techniques and those of other experts. Thank you very much for sharing just a little. I know we're scratching the surface, but thank
Sure.
you. For our viewers, you can learn more about Lars Peterson and his techniques and his presentation in the upcoming publication of Lifting the Veil. So thank you. All right, we're gonna switch gears a little bit. Our next segment is an interesting one. We're gonna sort of welcome Maria LaFrance and Jill Wells and Jordan Bell. I want to start with Maria LaFrance. Hello. Um, just tell us a little bit about who you are and tell us about your family, Maria.
Yes. Hi. I am in Des Moines and I have a 32-year-old son who's adulting, and I have a 24-year-old son who's adorable. And we say that he's 24 going on one. So he's in a wheelchair. He's completely dependent upon us for everything, meals, toileting, feeding, dressing, all sorts of personal hygiene, and transportation. So he's got quite big. And so I rely heavily on my husband and a Hoyer lift to lift him. But thanks to yoga, I've
Mhm.
got stronger and I'm able to lift him as well. But we need to watch our backs. So he's very cute. He's nonverbal. He makes a lot of noises, but he's overall quite joyful.
And his name's Quincy, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
how your story popped onto our radar here at DSM Magazine. We noticed that this year at the Des Moines Arts Festival, there was a new feature called Quincy's
Mhm.
Sensory Space.
Yeah.
Um, Tell us a little, we'll get into the details of that, but tell us about what a sensory friendly space is, just in general terms. What is that for folks who may not know?
Sure. Well, if you don't mind me backing up a little bit,
Mhm.
part of that is we've been taking Quincy to the art festival and to music concerts, church, 8035 Music Festival, Hinterland Music Festival, and it's a lot of extra work to bring a special needs family member out anywhere. There's a lot that goes into that. And being a parent of a special needs child can be quite isolating.
Mhm.
And if you're going to get to that, I can answer that later, but or I can take it now if you want.
Go for it. Yeah, go
Okay,
for it.
so everyone wants a sense of belonging, and if a person has a condition or some sort of special need, mental or physical disability, it can feel they can feel different and they can feel isolating. So they want to feel like they belong, and for families, it's especially isolating because we feel different. It's sometimes there is an element of stigma
Mhm.
or maybe shame because your child isn't behaving the way a typical child would. And so we bring Quincy out to these places and like the art festival. And now I'll get to your question with the sensory space. And many times it's a little challenging. And if Quincy doesn't handle the noise or the heat
Mhm.
or the all the stimuli that happen, such as the sound, the lights, the feels, everything that goes with taking him to a public environment. You know, he doesn't know what he's supposed to touch and what he's not supposed to
Mhm.
touch. So the sensory space, just to compare that with, say, an ADA section at a festival, the sensory space allows everyone to participate. When we take Quincy to the ADA section at a festival, which might be a platform or a separate section, often we are alone. We are not with our friends in that environment. So that
Mhm.
even then, even though we're very grateful that it exists, it's somewhat isolating in that regard. Um, the sensory space, I think another question you'd had is what type of needs would a person have in
Sure.
public?
Yeah.
And so if a person's in the wheelchair, they might have a colostomy bag, they might have a G tube, they might have a pacemaker, or some things that the general public might not see, that they need a place where they can tend to those needs with a sense of dignity and
Mhm.
privacy. And so the sensory space started out as a place to where could someone go if they need to change themselves, like a
Mhm.
changing table, or if they had a seizure, if they got overheated and needed a quiet place to lie down.
Mhm.
But it's also like what would appeal to people with special needs and diverse neurodivergent um, senses that see the world differently from typical people.
Do you find, I imagine when you're out and about in public with Quincy, are you always kind of on the lookout for where you might need to go if things spin out of control, or are you always kind of scanning the area?
Yes, that is key, and we also pack a bag for emergencies, if you will. And oftentimes we're fully prepared to just pack up and go home if it doesn't go the way that. So we try to keep an open mind and keep our expectations low,
Mhm.
as we don't know how the day's going to go.
So let's zoom in on the arts festival. You've gone for years. How did
Mhm.
Quincy's sensory space come about?
So it started as a place for how can we serve people with special needs so that it won't deter anyone from going to the festival. And this was the brainchild of Stephen King, the director. And he asked me, what would that look like? And then I grabbed all sorts of a vision board, if you will, of colors and pictures. And wouldn't it be cool if we had this serpentine experience that people could walk through and experience uh, all the senses? So if someone was sight impaired, could they experience sounds? If
Mhm.
someone is physically impaired, could they experience things visually at different heights? If they're sensory impaired, could there be different tactile experiences that art speaks to everyone, and what beauty's in the eye of the beholder as well. And so it's important for art to help get us out of our perspective and reframe, and many of the things that Lars Peterson just said, to sort of ground ourselves and get us off rumination and open up our minds to what's possible. And so the sensory space is a place of beauty. And I would say that the coolest thing about it is it was open to everyone. So there was no
Mhm.
isolation there. And it was the DLR group was fabulous in uh, making it happen. They're the ones that said, what can we do and how can we fund this? And so that was beautiful as well. So there
Let's
was,
bring
yeah.
let's bring in Jill to talk about how the design for it came together. Maria, you gave us some good specifics about just imagining what that space might look like to appeal to different kinds of folks with different needs and abilities. Jill, welcome. How did you approach this assignment? Have you done something like this before?
Yes, thank you. For anyone who's online who might appreciate a image description, my name's Jill Wells. I am a female of color. I have short black hair. I'm wearing a black top. I'm sitting in a room, and behind me is a white and gray wall. I had been working with sensory design for some time, but being able to come on and work with the family, Quincy's family, Maria, and the festival was a first, and it was incredible.
How did so when you were invited, what was the framework or what did your assignment look like? How did you approach that?
The design for Quincy Sensory Space was really based around biophilic principles. And so, biophilic design is an approach to creating spaces that intentionally connect people to calming patterns and sensory qualities of nature. So, in Quincy Sensory Space, this meant shaping an environment with soft, layered colors, gentle movement, places where your body can settle without needing to perform. And the overall structure is 96 feet in length, over 20 feet in width, and over 10 feet in height. So it's a massive, massive kind of skeleton that I outfitted with translucent panels of vinyl that really diffuse the sun like leaves in shifting color fields that invite curiosity without overwhelm. So even in a busy festival, the pavilion offers these kind of pockets of grounding, small moments that kind of act like shade in the natural environment. So, by making these sensory choices both visible and intentional, the space really lifts the veil on how deeply our mental health and identities and disability experiences are shaped by the environments that we move through. And the biophilic principles really helped me, not just for the overall design, but for people with um, keeping their nervous systems in mind.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Just a sneak peek, I will encourage folks to when you get your hands on the copy of the magazine, you can see some beautiful photos of what Jill is describing and what she built for the festival. The photos are really lovely. I happened to visit it myself, and it was really cool. It was both I think it probably served both um, both goals. It was a therapeutic space, it was a calming space, but it was also a beautiful piece of artwork. Tell us a little bit about the feedback you got. You said that you heard from at least one mom who said that it kind of gave her family a sense of dignity. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of what Maria was touching on. And for me, I truly see art and care as two of the same branches. So both are ways of making the world more livable. And when I think about this mother's expression and her words, they really stuck with me. And dignity is not a detail. I really feel like it is a foundation for our lives. And her response was directly connected to what Maria had kind of touched on as well, the private,
Mhm.
full adult changing room, which logistically for an outdoor festival is a feat in itself. And I really hope that people look to the festival for that area of expertise. We were supported by Easter Seals in bringing that to life. And so we equipped the adult and youth room with a hydraulic changing bed, essential care supplies. There was bilingual Spanish and English signage. We had volunteers that attended to welcome the families. And there were moments that really, again, lifted the veil on how visible the emotional labor of disability, identity, and mental health can be, and how transformative it is when we are finally in spaces that acknowledge our realities. And that feedback, that mother's feedback, became a compass, reminding me really that art is also about creating conditions for belonging.
Mhm.
It pushes me to design more boldly and more tenderly. And so care is tucked away into these spaces, but also kind of opened up and offered in a way that is very visible.
Hmm. Maria, what was some of Quincy's feedback? What did he think of the space?
Well, Quincy's nonverbal, so we just sort of have to guess.
Hmm.
But just cumulatively, I was there all weekend and just watching all of the people um, just interact with the unique instruments that were there. Um, I saw dads interacting with the kinetic sand
Hmm.
with their small kids. Um, Other children in wheelchairs playing with the water and the kinetic sand. That was really great. And Quincy himself tends to be content. He doesn't often let us know when something's going his way or not. So we have to sort of guess, but we think he had a fantastic time.
In the article, you also mentioned that it also changed the way that people interact with Quincy. That they it helps other folks see Quincy not as someone just with disabilities, but as a whole human being who is
Mhm.
has a capacity for joy. Did you find that folks interacted with him differently?
I think that's something that's really wonderful in our country right now is people are embracing the stigma is, I think, in many ways going away. And if somebody has special needs, and if people are aware of the special needs, if they are visible, people tend to be more welcoming and give him more grace. I think what was really fantastic about a place like Quincy Sensory Space at the Art Festival is that instead of being an afterthought, they are the stars.
Mhm.
That they are the humans that space is first and foremost intentioned for, and that really elevates them. So instead of feeling like, oh, did I get a last minute invite to the party? They're first in line to that party, and they're very welcome. And that is what we need to see more of in this country. Kudos to the art festival for making that happen. It was really beautiful and really making it a cool space to see typical people walk by and turn and look and say, what is this? And they're so curious, and they might not even have any special needs, but I guarantee they know someone who does, and they will be telling them about it for next year. I'll often think times something like this takes years to get into place. And it actually has taken many years. And this was the first year that it actually happened. And in many cases, it just keeps getting better and better.
That's cool. Just in at the DSM office, we receive lots of press releases, and we're seeing different sensory spaces or services popping up. The Iowa State Fair had a pop-up sensory space. The Des Moines Playhouse this season is offering sensory-friendly performances where the lighting is a little bit dimmer and the sounds are a little quieter, and the audience is encouraged to express themselves however they want. If they verbalize, it's okay, and none of the ushers are going to shush them. So I think more examples like this, if they help raise everybody's awareness that folks are have all different kinds of abilities and challenges, and I think it feels like we're making progress. But I want to bring in Dr. Bell from Des Moines University to give us a little bit of context from your perspective in occupational therapy and in your area of expertise. How is our understanding of sensory processing evolving? What are we learning, and what are the experts learning, but also what is society learning? Are we moving in the right direction?
That's a great question. I think it really goes back to what both Maria and Joel were saying, in that we are starting to recognize things more, and we're starting to want to be more inclusive as a society. I think in the past we've had an unfortunate history of expecting everyone to conform to the quote unquote norm. And we're just doing a much better job of realizing that we're all different and we all bring something different to the table. And so we need our world to be as inclusive to as many different people as possible in order to create the best experience for everybody. So I think we're definitely moving in the right direction. You mentioned lots of events that are popping up to be more sensory inclusive for kiddos and families, adults too, which I think is a wonderful first step.
Mhm. It makes me think of, 100 years ago when they were teaching penmanship, that lefties really had to struggle to learn how to write with their right hand. And, then we realized, hey, it's probably fine if people write with their left hands. But some of
Exactly.
that evolution is very slow. Um, Jill mentioned that the installation and the creation of the space at the Arts Festival did take some challenges to set up, an adult changing room and the necessary equipment. Dr. Bell, can you offer any maybe simple steps that businesses or churches or various leaders can take to make their spaces more inclusive or to make their programs or activities more inclusive, even if they don't have the budget or the resources to go big? Are there little steps that all of us can take to draw a wider circle and help more people feel more included?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question because you're exactly right. Sometimes it is a bigger commitment than we have the ability to make in one day. But some small steps that businesses or leaders could take in the meantime to kind of create a more welcoming environment, especially if we're talking sensory. There are a few things that are pretty easy to capture. One, a lot of time people with sensory differences really struggle in big crowds or really big environments. It can be loud and unpredictable. And so offering like a separate time or a quieter time. I know a lot of grocery stores, I think back to like during the pandemic, grocery stores offered an early shopping hour, maybe for more at-risk individuals. Something similar would be really wonderful to see for our neurodivergent individuals or people with sensory differences. Maybe it's just a quieter hour where they designate like this is a less busy time. I know that's a strategy the fair used. They do their sensory friendly morning on the Wednesday morning because that tends to be their lowest attendance day. And so trying to figure out within your business, maybe when is a lower attendance time, and then specifically marketing that to those sensory people that have higher sensory needs. And then reducing noise or like visual stimuli are two other things that can be really helpful. So if you play overhead music, maybe during your sensory hours, you turn that down or turn it off. Or if you have like a lot of flashing lights or bright signage, maybe you turn those down or off during certain times, and just kind of letting families know that this would be a less stimulating time for them to bring their kids in or themselves.
Those are great examples of very doable things that that many people those are choices many of us can make. Part of the value of this discussion is just raising awareness. Unless you know someone, it may not occur to you. So the more we raise awareness on this, the better it affects everybody. Before we move on to our next segment, our third chapter here in this discussion, are there other things, and I'll toss this out for any of you, Maria or Jill or Jordan, are there other things you would like people to know about folks with sensory processing challenges or things that we can do? I want to give you one last shot if there's anything else in this discussion that you'd like folks to know.
For me, the biggest thing that I always share is that we all have a sensory system, every single one of us, and a lot of us make our own accommodations in order to meet our sensory needs. So, an example I give my students a lot is every one of them has a big water bottle with a straw. And drinking water from a straw gives you that oral input. It's alerting, it's calming. It really meets both needs. And that's a way that they are able to adapt for themselves. And so I think when we just remind ourselves that we make these adaptations every day, and then asking ourselves, how could we help support other people to make different adaptations so that things can be accessible for them.
All right, thank you. Jill, you had your hand up.
I love that point. And that's really what I was going to kind of touch on. So just to piggyback off of what Jordan was saying, I think, and to answer your question around what can folks do, one of the best questions I feel like is inclusive design. When we think about widening um, and asking ourselves, who is this space designed for? So just to kind of toss that out and to pair off of what Jordan was saying, I think the more often we can ask ourselves those questions in any sector, in any environment, in any occasion, it would help us identify who's it not designed for, and then we can make a decision on how we want to have those adaptations.
Mhm. Maria, anything else you'd like to share? I know you're sitting on a vast wealth of hard-earned knowledge and wisdom. What else should we know?
Yeah, I guess my advice would be to the parents um, and and to the people with special needs. If you're, it's so isolating, and sometimes it feels at that moment easier to just stay home. And in doing so, then sometimes when you are home, you feel bad and you miss out. And so, my advice would be to just try it. Just try it. And if it doesn't work out, you go home. But give yourself grace either way. I think every time I do something, I meet a new person and make a potential new friend. And those are resources that might be there when I need them or when Quincy needs them. And so if people didn't know Quincy and get to know Quincy, he wouldn't have this cool space named after him. So you just never know what might happen. And so that's my advice. But also, if you don't make it out, don't beat yourself up. Just give yourself grace.
All right. Thank you all very much for sharing different perspectives of this really remarkable story. I hope we can spread the word. Um, there's a when you get a chance, click into the chat comments. There are people who are cheering for you, who are supporting you. I want to move to our third and final segment of this discussion. And this story in the upcoming publication kind of came together when we were brainstorming different hurdles along life's journey that everybody goes through. And sometimes it feels really isolating, like what Maria said, but it's helpful to know that everybody goes through this. So we're going to bring in Maddie Morey and David Isles. And at first, it may seem like an unusual pairing, but Maddie helps people bring babies into the world, and David Isles with Isles Funeral Home helps families send folks off with dignity and say goodbye with dignity. So they're sort of, in some ways, they are complete opposite jobs, but there are also some common similarities too. Maddie, will you tell us just a little bit about what you do, your specialty?
Sure. So I'm Maddie Morey. I'm a licensed independent social worker in the state of Iowa. I'm also a therapist. My specialty area is with women who have struggled with infertility, pregnancy loss, and that postpartum period as well.
And what are some of the most common misperceptions or misconceptions that you bump into?
Sure. So it goes along the lines of, postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, um, is a normal part of motherhood, when in fact it's not. It's something that a lot of women struggle with, and men as well. About 10% of fathers struggle with postpartum anxiety, depression, among other things. I think that's a really big one that people don't really know much about. I think also going into parenthood, especially first-time parents, they really don't recognize that there's grief involved.
Mhm.
And, when we think of grief, we think of death and loss. When grief can be a big change in your life, grief can be something that looks different, and, you don't have the same life that you had before. Even if it was a very wanted, planned pregnancy and birth, it can still come with grief.
Mhm. How how do you help folks move through that grief in a healthy way? How do you Lars offered some very practical tips that take some practice, but you can do it. Are there tips like that that you help people move through what can be it's from the outside it seems like it should be everything's sunshine and rainbows and such a joyful part of life, and that is definitely true, but I think probably there's some surprising sad parts too. How do you coach people through that?
Sure. I think first we have to give ourselves grace. And I think a lot of the times, especially now, people hold themselves to a standard that is social media. And social media, we're only posting things that are, picture perfect and things that are really set up for the camera. And so, giving yourself grace and understanding that this is a really tough time. This is a huge transition. I also think that our grief needs to be seen and it needs to be validated. So we tend to isolate, like postpartum is a very isolating time. And when we isolate, it just exacerbates our grief even more. So really reaching out to our community, reaching out to our support system if we need help, if we need just someone to come sit with us, during our paternal leave, maternity leave, paternal leave. Um, Whatever we need to do, it's just finding those support systems.
Mhm. Are there other ways that partners or friends or neighbors can help support somebody who may be going through postpartum challenges without overstepping or minimizing their feelings? We never know what's going on. We often don't know what's going on inside somebody else's household. Are there respectful ways that we can help?
Mhm. I always say just ask, because, everybody has their own boundaries. Everybody has, their own unique needs, especially during that postpartum period. And so to ask and to say, "Hey, I am here for you. I want to support you. What is a good way to support you? Or what does that look like for you?" And it is up to that person to be able to communicate that to you. So just being there in any capacity that they might need, um, I think it really does not hurt to just reach out and just say, "Hey, I support you. Please let me know what I can do."
Mhm. That that is good advice, and I think it's probably advice that applies also to David Isles, to your work. Again, we never know people's their inner emotional lives, but often people don't know how or what to say to people who are grieving someone who has died. Are you hearing parallels at all? Do you coach people through the same way to give them grace?
Definitely. And I mean, to that point of kind of knowing that right thing to say, it kind of gets back to that point of trying to fix grief, and that's not really what our job is, right? Our job more so is just to be there for people. And it's funny, I personally struggle with that from the standpoint of trying to be a fixer, but sometimes it is just being there for that individual and making sure that they know that you're there for whatever it is that they need.
Mhm.
Yeah.
One thing when I was editing this article, um, the parallels that I pointed out before, there are with the birth of a child, there can be surprising notes of grief, and with the death of a loved one, there can be surprising notes of joy. David, in your experience, how do you bring that out, or how do you encourage people to think about that inevitable ending in a way that helps families feel good as possible about that transition?
Yeah. So I think, for lack of better words, in our profession of funeral service, it's fair to say that from a consumer standpoint, people don't want those cookie cutter funerals anymore of just like grandma had it or just like mom and dad had it. And so what it's our job to do is to make it as meaningful and unique to that individual that we're there to honor. And for us to effectively do a good job at doing that, it's really making sure that we learn about who it is that's that person that we're there to honor, and what were they passionate about, what was their profession, what are their hobbies. And in doing that, a lot of the times we find them kind of walking down memory lane and thinking about things that they might not have thought about for the last 10 years or even longer. And so, our job is to kind of help guide that process by asking the right questions. But then to a certain extent, we're along for the ride and get to participate with that family and listening about who, again, was this person, and things that haven't been talked about for a long time.
In the article, you mentioned that, especially with families that come to you early and have time to have those discussions, that they are surprised at how fun they are. Maybe fun isn't the right word, but they reflect on, some of the best moments of people's lives. Do you find that's the case, that people are surprised at those discussions and that those memories that come up?
Well, so the short answer is yes. And to add just a little bit of context, we help families from two standpoints, right? We help them when they've already lost a loved one, and then some people do take the opportunity to come in and plan it in advance. And to that comment of people who have fun with it, I would say, generally speaking, that'd be more applicable to the people who are taking care of it ahead of time. But one of the comments, we have a handful of people on our team that help families with pre-planning. And a comment that comes up often is families tell them, my goodness, I didn't think I was going to laugh this much while planning my funeral. And I think that takes them off guard. And for lack of better words, when you have the opportunity to sit down, and Lars and Maria talked about this earlier, of the importance of being grounded. And when you're dealing with this in a time where you don't have this heavy weight hanging over you of this death that just happened and all of these other thoughts that are racing through your mind, and you can really be in the moment and think about things logically, yeah, it's definitely a surprising experience for a lot of people when what they're used to is making those types of decisions and having that conversation right after a profound loss has occurred.
Mhm. Um, I didn't expect there to be such parallels between these three discussions, but it does occur to me that um, all of you during this hour are encouraging folks to ask questions, that each person is individual, and there is value in respectfully asking people how they're feeling, how they're doing, and seeing them as individual people rather than just cookie cutter neighbors or friends or clients, or there's such value in asking questions. David, do you have any just general advice for people who want to prepare for a funeral as best they can? How often or how early should they start thinking about it? How many people should be involved? What are some basic tips that you would offer families?
From its highest level, the biggest advice that I would give to friends, colleagues, anybody would be encourage your loved ones, and for yourself as well, to go ahead and pre-plan your final wishes. Um, I think the biggest reason that I say that is when your time of need comes, You're giving your families one of the biggest gifts of love from the standpoint of you're allowing them to focus on what's important at that time, which is to grieve. People draw a lot of parallels between planning a funeral and planning a wedding. The difference is that when you plan a funeral, you have to make all those decisions in a matter of days versus a matter of many, many months. And then on top of that, it's not even factoring in all of those, again, just the heavy thoughts that are coming down in terms of this profound loss that you've just experienced.
Mhm.
And from experience, seeing, for lack of better words, the static that's going on in a family's face when we're asking them some of these questions, like what scripture are we going to read? What needs to be in the obituary? What do you want mom to wear? And they're just trying to process what happened. So if you take the time to go in and pre-plan and just put your thoughts down, what you allow for is your family to come in, sit down with us, and really the two things they have to tell us is what day do you want to have the service and what time do you want it to be at? And outside of that, they can focus on grieving.
Mhm. I, it occurs to me that both you and Maddie, you can help people prepare as much as you can, but there will be inevitable surprises. But the preparation kind of minimizes the variables for sure. Maddie, is there anything else you'd like people to know about your work or about the bumps that come along with a new baby?
I think just that it's all a unique journey and everyone's personal experiences are so different. And, to just be cognizant of not comparing ourselves to another parent or our children to other children and giving ourselves grace through this really, really tough time.
Thank you. David, one final word.
No, I think it's great. I think that one of the big things that everyone has touched on is the importance of preparation. And especially in our profession, that could not be more important.
All right. Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you to all of our experts. I know we're just scratching the surface about what you do every day, but I will tell you it's reassuring to know that there are experts out there to help us through whatever stages of life we are going through. And it's a reminder that we are not alone, and that there's some really smart people like you who are kind and compassionate, and working together to smooth us all through this thing called life. So we spun it into we got real big here, big deep discussions, but it's always helpful to learn from experts, and it's a privilege to be able to talk with you. Before we head out, we're rounding out the hour. I just want to remind folks that DSM Magazine and our sibling publication, Business Record, we have events like this throughout the year to convene experts and create a platform for discussions, and also to share good news and challenging news, all of that. So, next up on the DSM calendar, we will unveil our next magazine with a party on January 13th at Soma Salon and Spa in West Des Moines. And then on February 25th, we will celebrate our Home Design Awards to elevate good design around the city, around Greater Iowa. That'll be at the Krause Gateway Center. You can find all of that information at the little QR code on your screen, or if you go to dsmmagazine.com. Always, we are looking for story ideas. If you have ideas or suggestions for people we should interview, please let me know. My email is on the slide here, and our advertising team would love to hear from you if you'd like to buy an ad or sponsorship to any of our publications or events. I want to give one final shout out to Broadlawns. As I mentioned earlier, we could not do this without our sponsors. So thank you to Broadlawns. And just one last plug. This is on your screen here is the cover for our next issue of Lifting the Veil. We publish this annually, and the experts you heard from today, those are just a few of the stories that are featured in this new publication. My colleague, Haley Evans, she led the charge to pull together the stories on this and make sure that the stories were accurate and true, and she worked with our team to make it beautiful. So thank you all. Thank you all for tuning in. Please keep in touch, and we will keep this conversation going. Have a good day.